a space where we explore personal growth, emotional intelligence, and the deeper skills that help you live with more clarity and confidence. Whether you're here to improve your English, understand your mind, or simply find calmer ways to handle life, you're in the right place. This is not about perfection or quick fixes, but about learning practical ideas that make a real difference in everyday life. Today's topic touches something we all experience but rarely understand: why our emotions can change so quickly, and how we can stay steady even when life feels uncertain. If you've ever felt your mood shift because of one comment, one delay, or one unexpected situation, then this episode is for you. Let's slow down together and discover a different way of relating to what happens inside us. Imagine this. You've just shared an idea in a meeting, something you actually felt good about. You thought it was clear, useful, maybe even a little impressive. And then someone says, quite casually, "I'm not sure that really makes sense." In that small moment, something shifts inside you. You might recognize this feeling. Your chest tightens a little. Your mind speeds up. A warm wave of embarrassment, maybe irritation, maybe self-doubt, begins to rise. It happens faster than we realize. One simple sentence from someone else, and suddenly your inner world is no longer calm. Before we know it, the mind starts reacting. Why would they say that? Did everyone think my idea was stupid? I should have explained it better. Or maybe the reaction goes outward. They always criticize. They don't understand. Thoughts come quickly, one after another, each one adding more emotional charge. What began as a small comment now feels like a personal attack, or a proof that we are not good enough. And it's not only in meetings. It happens when a message doesn't get a reply, when someone we care about sounds distant, when we make a mistake, when plans change unexpectedly. In these moments, emotions don't politely knock on the door. They rush in. Disappointment, anger, anxiety, shame. They can take over the space of our awareness so completely that we forget there was ever a sense of balance. Most of us struggle here. We either get carried away by the emotion, saying or doing things we later regret, or we try to push the feeling down, pretending we are fine while tension quietly builds inside. On the outside, life continues. On the inside, it can feel like a storm, fast, noisy, and hard to control. What's important is this: nothing is wrong with you for reacting this way. This is a very human experience. Our minds are built to notice threat, to protect our image, to avoid pain. But there is a cost. When every small event can disturb our inner state, our peace depends on things we cannot control. Other people's words, outcomes, opinions, and moods. Yet, there is another way to relate to these emotional waves, a way that does not require us to become cold, distant, or emotionless. A way that allows us to feel deeply and still remain steady inside. Most people never learn this skill. not because it is impossible, but because no one ever shows them that such inner balance is actually available. What is equanimity? Let's now put a word to this different way of being. The word is equanimity. At its core, equanimity is a state of inner steadiness, a balanced and stable way of relating to our experiences, especially the emotional ones. It describes a mind that remains grounded even when situations are pleasant or unpleasant, when things go our way or fall apart. It is not a dramatic state, not something intense or extraordinary. In fact, it is quiet. It is the subtle strength of not being pulled too far in any direction by what is happening around us. Equanimity does not mean the absence of emotion. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings. It does not ask us to stop feeling, to become cold, detached, or indifferent. We are human beings, and emotions are part of our natural design. Joy, sadness, frustration, excitement, fear, all of these still arise. The difference is not in whether emotions appear, but in how we hold them. With equanimity, emotions are allowed to move through us without completely taking control of our thoughts, words, and actions. A helpful way to understand this is through the image of the ocean. On the surface, the ocean can be full of waves. Some are small and gentle. Others are strong and chaotic during a storm. These waves are like our emotions, constantly moving, changing, rising and falling. Now imagine going deeper into the ocean. A few meters below the surface, the water becomes calmer. Deeper still, there is a quiet stability that is not affected by every movement above. Equanimity is like living more from that deeper place inside ourselves. The waves still exist on the surface of our experience, but they no longer define the whole of who we are in that moment. Psychologically, equanimity is closely connected to emotional regulation and awareness. It is the ability to notice what we are feeling without immediately becoming that feeling. For example, instead of, "I am angry," there is a subtle shift toward, "Anger is present." This small change in perspective creates space. In that space, we are less likely to react automatically. Equanimity does not stop the first emotional reaction from arising. That is often fast and instinctive. What it changes is what happens next. This brings us to another important comparison: reaction versus response. A reaction is usually quick, automatic, and driven by emotion. It often comes from habit, fear, or the need to defend ourselves. A response, on the other hand, includes a moment of awareness. There is a pause, even if it is brief. In that pause, we recognize what we are feeling, and we choose how to act, rather than being pushed into action by the emotion itself. Equanimity supports this shift. It is the inner condition that makes a thoughtful response more possible than an impulsive reaction. It is also important to understand that equanimity does not mean we stop caring. Some people fear that if they become more balanced, they will lose their passion or motivation. But equanimity is not emotional flatness. It is emotional stability. You can still care deeply about your work, your relationships, your goals. The difference is that your inner state is not constantly shaken by every success or setback. Praise does not make you lose yourself in excitement, and criticism does not destroy your sense of worth. There is a quiet center that remains. In daily life, this might look like feeling disappointed when something doesn't work out, but not falling into hours or days of self-blame. It might mean feeling nervous before an important event, but still being able to think clearly and act with intention. It might mean hearing criticism, noticing the sting, and still being able to listen without immediately attacking or shutting down. The emotions are real, but they move through a mind that is more spacious and steady. At a deeper level, equanimity reflects an understanding that life is naturally changing. Situations shift, people change, outcomes are uncertain. When we expect everything to go exactly as we want, our emotional life becomes a constant struggle against reality. Equanimity grows when we begin to accept that ups and downs are part of the human experience. This acceptance does not make life perfect, but it reduces the extra suffering created by resistance. So equanimity is the ability to remain internally balanced while fully experiencing life. It is a quiet strength, an emotional maturity, and a form of inner freedom. We still feel the waves, but we are not thrown around by every one of them. We still have emotions, but they do not completely own us. We are able to observe, to pause, and to choose. And this sounds simple when we describe it, almost obvious, yet in real life it often feels very difficult to live this way. So why is this so difficult for us as human beings? Why humans struggle with emotional balance. If equanimity is such a healthy and balanced way to live, why does it feel so hard to maintain? Why do we understand the idea, even agree with it, and yet still find ourselves overwhelmed by emotions in ordinary situations? The answer begins with something very human: the way our brain is designed. Long before we worried about emails, social status, or job interviews, our nervous system developed to help us survive. Its main job is not to keep us calm. Its main job is to keep us safe. And to do that, it is constantly scanning for danger, rejection, loss, and uncertainty. This survival system reacts much faster than our rational thinking. Imagine you are waiting for an important message. Maybe you applied for a job, or you sent a message to someone you care about. Hours pass. No reply. You might notice how quickly your mind starts creating stories. Maybe they didn't like me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe this opportunity is gone. The emotional reaction can feel real and intense, even though nothing has actually happened yet. Your brain treats uncertainty as a potential threat. It would rather prepare for the worst than stay neutral. From a survival perspective, this makes sense. From an emotional balance perspective, it creates a lot of unnecessary stress. Fear plays a big role here, but it is often subtle. It is not always the dramatic fear of physical danger. More often, It is social or psychological fear, the fear of rejection, failure, embarrassment, or losing our sense of worth. Take a job interview, for example. Even before we enter the room, the body might feel tense. The heart beats faster. Thoughts become louder. Why? Because our brain links this situation to survival in a modern form. If I fail, I lose an opportunity. If I lose the opportunity, my future is uncertain. The emotional system reacts as if something very serious is at risk. In that state, staying calm and balanced is not easy. The system is activated to protect us. This is also where the ego comes in. The ego, in this context, is our sense of identity, how we see ourselves, and how we want others to see us. We all carry an image of who we are: capable, kind, intelligent, strong. When something threatens this image, emotions rise quickly. Imagine an argument with someone close to you. They say, "You never listen," or "You're being selfish." In that moment, it may feel less like a simple comment and more like an attack on who you are. The ego moves into protection mode. Instead of listening, we prepare to defend. We interrupt, we explain, we blame. The emotional reaction becomes stronger than our ability to stay balanced. Another challenge is our strong desire for control. We feel safer when we believe we can predict and manage what will happen. But life does not always follow our plans. Messages are delayed. Interviews do not go as expected. People misunderstand us. Plans change. When reality does not match our expectations, frustration and anxiety appear. Part of us says, "This shouldn't be happening." That inner resistance adds another layer of emotional tension. We are not only dealing with the situation itself, but also with the gap between how we want things to be and how they actually are. Attachment to outcomes makes this even more intense. It is natural to want certain results, to be accepted, to succeed, to be appreciated. But when our emotional stability depends completely on those outcomes, we become fragile. If we get the result we want, we feel great. If we don't, we feel deeply disturbed. Our inner state rises and falls with external events. In this way, our peace is always at risk, because outcomes are never fully in our control. Equanimity becomes difficult because we are emotionally tied to things that are uncertain by nature. All of these factors, the survival brain, fear, ego protection, the need for control and attachment to outcomes, are not signs that we are weak or flawed. They are part of being human. They explain why emotional reactions happen so quickly, and why inner balance requires practice. When we lose our calm, it is often because older, deeper systems inside us are trying to protect us, even if their reactions are no longer helpful in modern life. Understanding this can bring some compassion toward ourselves. We are not failing at being calm. We are learning to work with a system that was never designed for constant emotional stability. And this understanding is important because it reminds us that developing equanimity is not about shutting down these systems or pretending not to feel. It is about learning to stay present with these reactions without being fully controlled by them. This is why equanimity is not emotional numbness. Equanimity versus emotional suppression. At this point, an important misunderstanding needs to be cleared up, because many people hear about emotional balance and immediately think it means becoming less emotional, less expressive, or somehow harder inside. They imagine a person who never shows sadness, never feels hurt, never reacts strongly. But that picture is not equanimity. That is much closer to emotional suppression, and the two are very different, even if they can look similar on the surface. Emotional suppression happens when we feel something uncomfortable and quickly try to push it away. The feeling is judged as bad, weak, or unacceptable. So instead of allowing it to be there, we try to hide it from others and often from ourselves. The body might still feel tight. The mind might still be busy. But on the outside we say, "It's fine," or "I don't care," even when we clearly do. This is not balance. It is a form of inner pressure. The emotion does not disappear. It simply goes underground, where it can build up and later come out in unexpected ways. Imagine someone who shares something personal with a friend and receives a dismissive response. It hurts. There is disappointment, maybe even a sense of rejection. But the person smiles and says, "No worries, it's nothing," while inside they feel small and ignored. They might tell themselves they are being strong, that they are not letting it affect them. In reality, the feeling has not been processed. It has just been covered. Later, that same person may feel distant, irritated, or suddenly emotional in another situation, without fully understanding why. Suppression often creates emotional confusion rather than clarity. Equanimity, on the other hand, includes emotional honesty. It does not deny the feeling. It allows it to be recognized clearly and calmly. In the same situation, a person with equanimity might notice, "That comment hurt," or "I feel a bit sad right now." There is no drama, no exaggeration, but also no denial. The emotion is acknowledged as a real experience happening in the moment. Instead of pushing it down or acting it out impulsively, the person stays present with it. They may choose to express it in a thoughtful way, or they may simply allow it to pass without turning it into a bigger story. The difference is subtle, but powerful. Suppression says, "I shouldn't feel this." Equanimity says, "I do feel this, and that's okay." Suppression tightens the inner world. Equanimity creates space inside it. When we suppress, we are often at war with our own emotions. When we practice equanimity, we are in a more cooperative relationship with them. We recognize that emotions are signals, movements of energy, temporary states, not permanent truths about who we are. Consider another example. Someone who loses an opportunity they were hoping for. With suppression, they might immediately say, "I didn't even want it that much," trying to protect themselves from disappointment. But the disappointment remains, unacknowledged. With equanimity, the person might quietly admit, "I'm disappointed. I really hoped this would work."